In this lecture, we're going to write our first directive. I've thrown a lot of concepts at you. Let's begin using the hooks and arguments we learned in the last lecture. We'll be working in the directive file we created earlier. In the configuration object for our directive, we'll add the beforeMount function. The two most commonly used lifecycle functions are the beforeMount and updated hooks. We're using the beforeMount hook because we want to insert the icon before the element is inserted into the document. The beforeMount hook will run before the element is inserted into the document. It's the perfect opportunity to add the icon. In the function, we're not expected to return anything. If we want to make changes to the element, we need to make them directly to the element parameter. In the function's parameters, we'll add the element parameter. The properties and methods are the same ones you would find if you were selecting the elements with vanilla JavaScript. Therefore, we can access the inner HTML property like so. The value for this will be the HTML for the icon. Open the Home component file located inside the Views directory. There's an icon in this component. The icon can be found in the main content section. It can be found under a comment that says icon. Cut the element and paste it in as the value for the inner HTML property. The string is entirely static. Ideally, we'll want to make the icon swappable with the icons listed in Font Awesome's directory. We'll learn how to handle that in a future lecture. If we leave it like this, this will completely replace the content inside the HTML. We don't want that. We want to add an icon inside the content. We can use the += assignment operator instead. This is the minimum setup for a directive. The next step is to register the directive. We're going to register the directive globally. In your editor, open the main.js file. Directives must be registered before the application is mounted. This file is where we're creating the Vue instance. At the top of the file, we'll import the icon file. We're assigning the import to a variable called icon. We'll need the configuration object to register the directive. Down below, along with other use functions, we'll call the directive function on the app instance. This function has two arguments. The first is the name of the directive. All directive names will have the v prepended to it. The v is how Vue identifies a directive. This way, they don't get mixed or treated the same as attributes. We're going to call our directive icon. The second argument is the configuration object. We'll pass in the icon object we imported. Our directive has been successfully registered. The next thing we'll do is use the directive. Because it's registered globally, we can use it in any component in our application. Let's use it in the component where we previously grabbed the HTML. Back in the Home component file, we'll add the vIcon directive to the parent div tag where we previously cut the icon. The name of the directive is called icon. Despite that, we are required to prefix the attribute with v. This is very important to understand. You can't omit the v, otherwise this will not work. We won't assign a value to the directive. This is because our directive isn't expecting a value. This won't work just yet. Switch back to the icon file for a moment. If we were to look closely, a red line will appear below the element parameter in the function. It's telling us we can't directly mutate the element parameter because of ESLint. In situations like these, we'll need to tell ESLint to ignore this line. There is another solution, but it'll typically lead to another error. It's too much of a hassle to go with alternative routes. We can fix this by hovering over the squiggly line. The pop-up will have an option called Quick Fix. If we click it, we'll be presented with the option of telling ESLint to ignore this line. Select this option. Visual Studio Code will add a comment above the line. This comment will tell ESLint to ignore the next line. This is a trick I recommend you use sparingly. The purpose of using ESLint is to help you write clean and efficient code. It doesn't make much sense to ignore it every time. You will always want to follow its recommendations. The only time you should do this is when the alternatives are too complex. After making those changes, go to your browser and view the home page. The icon appears in the header of the card. You can even inspect the element to find that the directive has been removed, like most directives. Even though it's nowhere to be found, View is capable of updating the directive if changes are made to the element it's applied to. In the next lecture, we're going to modify the directive to take in data. We'll be able to make it more dynamic by accepting values.